And I just have to say that if this is a Rorschach test, if this is an auditory inkblot test, I'm glad I came to the end of offing oneself because of the awful things you did versus just being a stone cold fucking killer because you want to get out of a situation. I'd like. Hey, everybody out there. Welcome back to another episode of the Audiophiles, hosted by me, Andy, and your friend John over there. Hello, John. And we are going to discuss a song that John is going to offer me up today. I'm going to go off, give it a listen, reaction, then we're going to come back and discuss in further detail. But you know how it goes. In order to do that, John needs to tell me what I'm up against today. So, John, what have you have in store?
We're going back to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
Excellent. It's always a
As,
happy day when you throw out Nick Cave to me.
oh, happy day. Yes. And yeah, so I alluded to in the past that he has a wide range of styles and development of his sound, and so this is a different taster as opposed to Deanna that we listened to before. This is called Jubilee Street.
Okay, Jubilee Street.
Mm.
All right. Well, guess I have everything I need. The wheels are already starting to work as often is the case when I'm listening to Nick Cave. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Let me go off and give Jubilee Street a listen, and I'll come back and let you know what I made of it. There it
On
is.
Jubilee Street, there was a girl named Lee. She had a history, but she had no past. When they shut her down,
She had a history, but she had no past. That is a very interesting line. I would expect nothing less from Nick. He is good at writing those lyrics and telling those stories. His writing style from a lyrical standpoint, I think I've said this before, reminds me of like how a writer might pen a really interesting short story or novella. It's like it evokes a great deal of thought but doesn't hit you over the head with detail. Now I know I'm just getting into this, but just that line alone kind of stirs up questions. Now, part of me doesn't even want to watch the video. He's a cool dude, but I mean, it's probably going to maybe give some of this away. I know that there's perhaps creative license by the person who directed and sort of like thought up the idea for the video, and maybe it doesn't connect directly to the lyrics. But I don't want to spoil my own interpretation of it. But to this point, she sounds like a very interesting individual um, that he's describing here. Yeah, let's. I want to take that back a little bit and let those lyrics kind of wash over me again because this sounds like the type of song where the story is very important.
on Jubilee Street, there was a girl named Lee. She had a history, but she had no past. When they shut her down, the Russians moved in. Now, I'm too scared to even walk on past. She used to say, all those good people down on Jubilee Street, they ought to practice what they preach. and here I come up the hill. I'm pushing my wheel of love. I got love in my tummy and a tiny little pain, and a 10-ton catastrophe on a 60-pound chain.
Oh man, that is a great line. Was it a 10-ton catastrophe on a something pound chain? Yeah, that is a very interesting line. It reminds me of like when I say I feel like 5 pounds of or 10 pounds of shit in a 5 pound bag. Like I'm not feeling well or I feel guilty about something. Um, and you know, both kind of connote this like this threshold that's been breached. This too much. This idea of too much. Yeah, really, really interesting stuff. God, I'm becoming such a huge fan of his storytelling. Um, Also, I don't want to like I know I'm really hung up on the lyrics and the story being told right now, but I don't want to take anything away from this sort of like beautifully kind of like meandering guitar bit, as well as this like the rim work on the drums with this occasional like shake of a tambourine. It's nothing crazy, but it's so good as this backdrop for the story that's being told. Yeah, this is good shit, man. It's good shit. I'm gonna take it back because I want to hear that line again. Because I'm probably gonna reference it when I talk to John.
Got love in my tummy and a tiny little pain, and a 10-ton catastrophe on a 60-pound chain.
Yeah.
And I'm pushing my wheel of love up Jubilee streets. Look at me now.
That feedback. Got me with the strings.
The problem was
Very interesting.
she had a little black book, and my name was written on every page. Well, a girl's gotta make ends meet, even down Jubilee Street.
Yeah, the shaking as he lights the cigarette, sort of the forgive me, but there's this term that gets thrown around sometimes, where there's this post nut clarity, and it looks like the guilt that comes with that is kind of hitting the narrator, where he's like, shit. And she's got this black book, right? And on which his name is scrolled on every page. So he is clearly implicated in some behavior that he probably doesn't want out there in the open. Um, so this kind of portrayal of the guy lighting the cigarette very shakily, I think, underscores that. Interesting stuff. Really, really interesting stuff. I love how he tackles like we've talked about some pretty morbid, you know, like horrific kind of material that he's covered in the past, but there's also this like now it's a bit more seedy, which is interesting to me that he's so good at writing about things that people often want to look away from. You know, I really dig that.
I ought to practice what I preach. These days I go downtown in my tie and tails, any longer. I am beyond recriminations. The curtains are shut. The furniture is gone. I'm transforming. I'm vibrating. I'm glowing. I'm flying. Look at me now. I'm flying. Look at me now.
Wow. Yeah, this was really fucking cool. This is a very we've talked about this descriptor before when covering some other tracks and artists and even some of his other works, but there's something cinematic about this storytelling. I'm taken actually back to when we did the PJ Harvey Tom York track. What was it, like the mess we're in? It has that same kind of quality, this really evocative story that's being told that kind of lets the listener's mind wander and go to places maybe they're not wholly comfortable with, and nonetheless are taken there. I love that. I love that shit, man. It just makes me feel a little like almost gives you the icks, but in kind of the best way. At least for me, I kind of like that. So yeah, this was really interesting. That whole last stanza, though. I don't know. You could talk about it being like maybe a depiction of the mindset of someone who is in like who's in the middle of, having sex with this sex worker, and how they think that they're above it, or in that moment it gives them this sort of feeling of being bulletproof. But it could also be the depiction of the person ending their life. I mean, that black book, his name being all over it, to sort of end the lyrics about being like beyond, recrimination and look at me now, like I'm vibrating. Was it like I'm, what did he say, shining or shimmering or something like that? And I'm flying. Like all of that sounds like a way one could describe like hanging yourself. Um, you know, just sort of like flailing above ground, um, color changing, you know, it's dark. I don't like to think about this stuff, but I like that you can be led to this uh without being so over the top or ham-handed. Um, it's almost like a lyrical Rorschach test. It's like, here's some lyrics that aren't descript enough. What do you see or interpret when you hear them or read them? And it kind of gives you an indicator into the psyche of the person that's listening, not only the person that wrote it. So there's an interesting exchange there, almost intimate exchange between this complete stranger, Nick Cave, and any rando in the audience who might happen upon this song and give it a listen and really dig into those lyrics. I could also be full of shit. I don't know, but that was my feeling about it. But I'd love to hear what John could say. Maybe fill in some spots. Let me know what he knows, because I'm kind of like super eager to find out. I'm becoming such a big fan of Nick Cave. Uh, Definitely like the way he writes a song. There's no doubt about that. Some interesting moody stuff going on there. Probably an interesting and moody dude, too. But anyway, let's get back to John, discuss further.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he's back. So you've had a listen to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Jubilee Street. I will say this before you get going. The version I gave you is kind of like the shortened single version. So fans of this song out there are going, what has John done? The original album version is 6 minutes, 36 records, and is significantly more in every way. However, the video of the single version is so good.
Yeah.
And it features the redoubtable Ray Winston, shut it, you slag, that I had to pick it. So sue me. That being said, what do you make of it?
Well, you know what? Part of me didn't want the video. Now I grew to love the video because I think it does a really good job of like this cinematic way
Yeah.
of telling a story to a song that is itself very cinematic. Um, but I wanted to kind of like be able to come to my own conclusions about it, as I often want to do with songs by Nick Cave. He's so good at writing in such a way that is not nail on the head, but
Oh, yes.
gives you enough detail to allow inference to kind of blossom and your own conclusions to kind of be to be drawn. And I think I explained it when I was listening to it, as listening to his songs are almost like auditory Rorschach tests or ink blot tests, because it is without enough detail to let you decide what you're hearing and what's being told, which then is kind of a glimpse into how you think. So there's this whole experience with listening to his music that I really like to to have unfold. And when you have a video perhaps leaking suggestions or plotting in its own bias, it can kind of infiltrate that organic experience that I wanted. But it was really good and it was really well shot. So go on. I'm sorry, you look like you have something you want to say.
Yeah, just to say this video is wonderful and really impressive, and it's a great experience, but it's only one element of the narrative of this song. There are more than one strand to this. And so
Okay.
the guy who put this video together has taken that particular slant, but there are others.
Okay. I would say the ending of this video suggests what may be the outcome, but it is not as vivid in its depiction as what leads up to it, which is the vibe I got anyway. I'd like to think that the video didn't kind of, interfere with my own interpretation and
Hmm.
infect the test pool, if you will, or whatever. But it was it was really fun to watch, and this is another great example of no matter what he's writing about, um, whether it's really dark and like murdery dark, or like we've experienced in some cases in the past with him, but also like seedy and sort of lascivious kind of subject matter, which is also entertaining and kind of dirty. And I like it being forced to experience that and watch it. I don't know. I had an older brother that made me watch Clockwork Orange when I was like 9 years old or something like that. And ever since then, I've just been drawn to this kind of weird, dark shit. So yeah, a lot of fun. No real build up or intro to this one, as the song like seemingly starts mid stride, but it is a slow and somewhat meandering stride that is easy to fall right into as the beat slowly shuffles along, complemented by this really pretty and almost contemplative guitar work. Um, I really, really liked the way that it started, and I liked that while it wasn't anything crazy musically, it was the perfect canvas to paint this story, this narrative that he then kind of presents to us. So, and within what has to be like 5 seconds of the song starting, Nick begins to sing. And boom, song title right out of the gate. But the street seems not to be the focus of the song, as we are quickly introduced to B, who has a history but lacks a past. Really interesting line. Love that line.
Yeah.
Maybe my second or third favorite line throughout all of this, which is saying something because he's got lots of really interesting lyrics in this. So between each line, I'm keying on this like these rim hits by the drummer, keeping the time of the song while the guitar continues to slowly crawl over the strings. And he continues to paint an interesting picture lyrically, singing that the Ruskies have moved in since was shut down, and that he fears that so much he refuses to walk past her old haunt or whereabouts. So interesting. He recalls that she used to say that folks should practice what they preach on Jubilee Street. But of all these really interesting bits of prose throughout the song, it was this line that I most enjoyed. I got love in my tummy and a tiny little pain and a 10-ton catastrophe. And like the rhythm of that phrase is great. But yes, a 10-ton catastrophe on a 60-pound chain.
Yeah.
That lyric just hits so damn hard, and it's actually reminds me of one of my favorite sayings when I'm not feeling well or feeling guilty or feeling bad about something, and I'll say I feel like 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. Um, and while mine is more humorous, there is this they share this idea that something can't be sustained, that it's beyond its breaking point, and at some point the other shoe's got to drop, that there's too much to bear. So around 145, we get a little shake of a tambourine, and the whining bit of sustained noise from the guitar, which was deft, little shot of mood already in like the sea of unease that we've got going on here. So I really, really dug that a lot. Um, uh, this all leads to the introduction of beautiful strings, as well as this fuller sound with the bass lightly thrumming underneath. Um, and then we discover that she possesses a little black book in which the narrator's name is scrawled on every last page. So a little to jump back a little bit to the you know 10-ton catastrophe on a 60-pound chain, and some of what's going on in the story at this point. I've referenced a rather crude saying that's been developed over the last few years, or that's what I've come to hear it, and that's this idea of post-nut clarity, which is sort of this this clarity of mind that comes after you get more some of your primal urges satiated, and it would appear that the narrator perhaps has some of this going on, when he realizes sort of and not to take a phrase out of a song that actually reminded me of my experience listening to this one, of the mess therein. More on that a little bit later. But yeah, so this is all interesting. You're getting, without a lot of words, you're getting a lot of emotion and
Yeah.
content, all of the feelings that are involved here. So at this point, after the whole the revelation about the little black book, it feels like my gut instincts are likely correct, and that this woman B was perhaps a lady of the night, especially given the line, "A girl's got to make ends meet, even down on Jubilee Street." Also, the shot of the woman in the video counting and folding cash while standing in a doorway in her underwear, that didn't hurt my supposition at all. I think I would have been led to this regardless of the wonderfully shot video that accompanied it. Another interesting lyric alert coming up here. These days I go downtown in my tie and tails. I got a fetus on a leash. Whew. Don't know what that means. Like a fetus on a leash. But it's you have a visceral reaction when you hear that. I'm not sure like I said, what it means, but I certainly hope it's a metaphor and not literal. Surely that would be frowned upon, even on Jubilee Street, I would think. So,
It's an extreme piece of jewelry, isn't it?
yes, it is. It is.
So the people who wear placentas as necklaces.
Yeah. It's like you go down to pet what you think is their dog, and you're like, holy shit, that's not what's on the other end of the So in the closing stanza of the lyrics, I get the idea now that the narrator has offed himself. As he states, he is now beyond recrimination. One can only be beyond the reach of law if they're likely dead. That would be my supposition of that. Now, it could also mean that this is what he feels like when he is in the throes of intercourse with her. Like all of this is washed away and doesn't mean anything. So there are two routes that this could go that I'm led to believe. Either he's humming with physical pleasure during sex, or he's killed himself. And that the curtains, like he says, the curtains are shut. That's in and of itself a metaphor for death. Um, and that the furniture is gone, which paints this picture of finality. He then says he is vibrating and glowing while he's asserting that he's flying, imploring that we look at him now. I assume, just using my own imagination, that perhaps this could describe someone in the throes of dying on the end of a rope. You're vibrating and convulsing. You're changing color because all the red and blood is rushing to your face. And you're flying because your feet are above the ground. But it's a very morbid form of flying. So this is where I tend to think he's going. Also, knowing his penchant for being able to really artfully pen things that describe the morose. So that's where I kind of want to end up. And I know I said earlier this is a bit of a Rorschach test and maybe an indictment on how my brain works, but I think that would be a really, in its own way, like beautiful is not the right word, but just artfully,
Yeah.
a way to describe that setting, right? Like someone swinging on the rope, but feeling relieved that they're out of the predicament that they're in. So really fucking awesome. I loved that whole last stanza and what it made me do.
So just to interject slightly there, just on what you said, there is also certain evidence that you relieve yourself when you're hung, and there was this myth. I don't know how much is true that men do become erect when hung as well.
Yeah,
And
and
whether
that's
that's
just a
true or not.
weird thing where
Yeah,
the autoerotic asphyxiation sort of
yeah.
like that niche thing. So
Michael
yeah,
Hutchinson. Yeah,
yeah. So they could go. You're right. They could easily tie in there. Tie in, no pun intended. We then get treated to some stellar instrumental work. The short remainder of the song, with more of this beautiful cinematic string arrangement and this subtle, but god damn it, is so good. This crashing guitar strumming. Now, something that's crashing you don't think is subtle, but it's not up or forward in the
yeah,
mix. It's all quite even. You would think that in any other scenario, that would be turned up to 11 to make it stand out, but he didn't. And I kind of like that too. Not only do I just like what it is, I like how it fit into this very brief portion here towards the end. So I really enjoyed the narrative aspect of this song. The music was pretty, but to me, it was this fucking short story novella. Like we talked about the myth of Hemingway and how to write something so evocative in so few words. He has a bit of that to him and how he writes
yeah,
lyrics.
yeah.
And that's what draws me to it. I love reading. I love stories that make you think, that kind of make you feel numb at points and like shudder at other points. He does that in a lot of his stuff. It really stands out to me. Um, it's I had a similar reaction to this as I did with Harvey's "The Mess We're In" that we just did recently. This tune allowed me to paint pictures and scenarios in my head. I didn't need the video. The video was great, artfully done, but I didn't need the video to understand what it was about. There was enough exposition to stir inference without it being too on the nose, as I said earlier. And I just love the style of writing. Also, the music, while not composite, was beautiful in its linear, I use that word a lot, straightforward design. And I really, really, really enjoyed this track. It's going to be, I don't want recency bias to be something that like infiltrates my decision making for our sort of year end wrap up that we do, where we go over our favorite songs. But if this doesn't make the top three, it's definitely an OLI. And it's one of the things that I really, really, one of the tunes that I've really, really enjoyed. And I'm growing to really respect Nick Cave and his
Yeah.
Awful Seeds.
Yes, definitely. Excellent. Okay. We'll do things a little bit different here, I think. So this is from their 15th studio album, Push the Sky Away. So we've jumped quite a bit.
Yeah.
I just want to give you a different aspect of his music, and is there is this common thread of this narration storytelling, which is masterful at. But yeah, this is definitely a different sound. Um, so personnel on this, Nick Cave. We've talked about Nick Cave and Bad Seeds before. I'll put a link in. We'll end up with a playlist of their tracks because I've got a couple more lined up straight away come January. Um, um, so yeah, so if you want to check out what it talks about the band, etc. But I'm not doing too much about the history, just about this particular album and this track. So personnel, Nick Cave. This is for the album. Vocals, piano, electric piano. Warren Ellis, violin, viola, tenor guitar, flute, synthesizer, electric piano, loops, backing vocals. Martin P. Casey, bass, backing vocals. Conway Savage, vocals, backing vocals. Thomas Wadler, drums, backing vocals. Jim Scalavanus, percussion, backing vocals. That's easy for him to say. And George Vajestica, 12-string guitar. And the children of Echo Saint Martin, backing vocals in this track. So Push the Sky Away, you might, because it's not that obvious. The last portion of this song has been chopped a little bit. Where the strings are swelling, there's actually a choral track as well. It's very similar to the strings, and that's the children singing. In the longer version, you notice it more immediately.
Okay.
So Push the Sky Away was recorded at the La Fabrique, which is a recording studio based in a 19th century mansion, or chateau as they call it, in Saint-Rémy de Provence in France. Nick Cave said, if I were to use that threadbare metaphor of albums being like children, then Push the Sky Away is the ghost baby in the incubator, and Warren's loops are its tiny, trembling heartbeat. Even when he's just talking about the album, he's poetic. So the songs on the album were written over the course of 12 months and took form in a modest notebook kept by Cave. The notebook contained notes on the album's songs, which were composed from, quote, Googling curiosities, being entranced by exotic English Wikipedia entries, whether they're true or not. According to Cave, the songs illustrate how the internet has influenced significant events, momentary fads, and mystically tinged absurdities, and question how we might recognize and assign weight to what's genuinely important. The cover image shows Nick Cave opening a window shutter to illuminate his naked wife, Susie Bick, and was shot by Dominique Isserman in the couple's own bedroom. Photograph was taken while Isserman was at Cave and Bick's home during a photo shoot for a fashion magazine that Bick was modeling for. Cave was assisting with the shoot and was asked by Isserman to open the shutter to let in more light. Bick was in the middle of changing and decided to drop her robe as Cave was opening up the shutters. Isserman impulsively decided to capture the scene. They're both really happy with it, and they discussed it with the band and just chose it for the cover. Push the Sky Away was the first Bad Seeds album to reach #1 in their home country of Australia. It reached #3 in the UK, which was the highest chart in Nick Cave, the Bad Seeds album at that time. Number 29 in America as well on the Billboard, which is quite something. And it reached #1 in 7 other countries as well. The album, you might be surprised to hear, received widespread critical acclaim and scored 81 on Metacritic. Pitchfork praised its foggy reveries built on ominously rumbling bass lines, twitchy rhythmic ticks, and hushed voice imitations, adding, it may not erupt with the same force as the Bad Seeds' stormiest gestures, but the underlying menace fueling it remains. NME described the album as a majestic and desolate masterpiece and noted that the band merges the experimentation and freedom of their side projects with Cave's most tender songcraft. And Slant magazine said, subtle, sprawling, and often achingly beautiful, Push the Sky Away is a late career masterpiece from an antipodean force of nature, an album of thrilling darkness pierced by moments of brilliant light. Little did they know what was yet to come. So we're going to go through the lyrics, but what I'll do, which I don't normally do, but I will just reference a few comments and bits that I picked up along the way. Then you'll hear the lyrics and maybe sort of think about some other stuff. So when Nick Cave was asked if he was referring to Jubilee Street, located in his hometown of Brighton, where he was living at the time, Cave replied, if people think they're going to have a good time down Jubilee Street, I'd say forget about it unless they're particularly interested in going to the library or Yo Sushi. When I was writing that, I had it in my mind that Jubilee Street was another more colourful street. Then I was actually walking along it, looked up and went, oh no, this is fucking Jubilee Street. There's a really interesting comment from a lyric website contributor who said, despite being sung by a man, Cave, and this is the point of the song where it says she used to say, not only is the following paragraph, but the whole song to the end may be interpreted as the narrator retelling B's story from her perspective, then the meaning changes dramatically. So yeah, if you think about that as actually her saying it rather than him talking about her, then it really does change the whole thing. Yeah, and there's lots of references to Brighton and stuff, and yeah. B was actually also the name of the library in Brighton, and lots of people have referenced that he was talking about that building, as well as Jubilee Street and Brighton itself. So there's like a building, a person, a street, and geography all related to this. So yeah, lyrics. I've included the extra lyrics from there. There's not much that they chopped out lyric-wise from this single version, but I've included it in there. I'll let you know. So on Jubilee Street, there was a girl named B. She had a history, but she had no past. When they shut her down, the Russians moved in. Now I'm too scared. I'm too scared to even walk on past. She used to say that all those good people down on Jubilee Street, they ought to practice what they preach. And then the album version, it just repeats it. Yeah, they ought to practice just what they preach, those good people at Jubilee Street. And here I come up the hill. I'm pushing my wheel of love. I've got love in my tummy and a tiny little pain, and a 10-ton catastrophe on a 60-pound chain. And I'm pushing my wheel of love up Jubilee Street. Ah, look at me now. And that's when the strings come in. And then we get this tempo change, just a slight, as you say, with the comes in. The problem was she had a little black book and my name was written on every page. Well, a girl's got to make ends meet, even down on Jubilee Street. And then the extra lyrics that we're missing is, I was out of place and time and over the hill and out of my mind on Jubilee Street. I got to practice what I preach. These days I go downtown in my tyne tails. I've got a fetus on a leash. I am alone now. I am beyond recriminations. Curtains are shut. The furniture is gone. I am transforming. I am vibrating. I'm glowing. I'm flying. Look at me now. I'm flying. Look at me now. And you have this crescendo finale instrument. Yeah. There's another comment on the lyric website for somebody else who says, well, it's still a Cave song. And I suppose no matter how old he gets, his songs will always be about the murder of beautiful young girls. So that's quite funny. 3 tracks later on the album, there is a song called Finishing Jubilee Street, where Nick Cave describes a dream he had immediately after going to sleep, finished writing this song, where he believes that he has taken a bride called Mary Stanford. It's a really interesting song. It's not quite as up as this, but interesting enough, RNLB Mary Stanford was a lifeboat which was stationed in Rye Harbour in the UK. And on the 15th of November, 1928, the Mary Stanford capsized, drowning the entire crew of 17. The lifeboat was launched in the southwest gale with heavy rail squalls and heavy seas and was going to rescue the vessel Alice of Riga. News was received that the crew of the Alice had been rescued by another vessel, and the recall signal was fired 3 times. Apparently, the lifeboat crew had not seen it. As the lifeboat finally came back to harbour, she was seen to capsize just short of the shore, and the whole crew perished. I don't know how that helps with the song, but it's something anyway. I would say myself about this song, I think it's an absolute masterpiece in terms of atmosphere, narration, beautiful, beautiful music. Meaning wise, I don't know. I don't think there's a right,
Mm.
I'm not sure. There's like different bits going on in it. I mean, I can see that sort of. If you imagine that bit with pushing a wheel of love up the hill, but you know, love in my tummy and the pain. If you switch that around and it was about the woman, it's talking about birth and her getting out of her work, with like, you know, having a child or whatever. But that last bit, again, it's almost like the line where it says, you know, I'm go downtown and my tying tails is really odd.
Mhm.
A fetus on her leash, you could again associate that with that she's got a child, you know, that's binding her, whatever. But when it goes into I'm alone now and beyond recriminations and curtains are shut, the furniture is gone. I mean, it could also mean that from his perspective, he did her in.
Mhm.
Um, and that has released him. They talk about serial killers and this transformation, and so the curtains are shut, like, and the furniture's gone. It's like all the things that held him back. His
Mhm.
conscience is gone. Any sort of social morals are gone as well, and now he's transforming. And you talk about, you know, in the sort of uh, Thomas Harris books about Lecter, about this transformation. You know, Lecter talks about it with his other patients. They all go through this transformation, sort of into killers, and it's
Yeah.
glowing and flying. So it could be that as well. It could be just, as you say, a spiritual version of the end of life. So it's whatever you want to put in your own head, as it were, which is again
Yeah.
clever, clever writing.
It is. It is the fetus on a leash is definitely something that can go both ways too, right? Because he could feel no, the knowledge that he's impregnated her could be something that he feels tethered to,
Yeah.
and thus needs to take some extreme action to
Mm,
solve. That action could either be the murder of her or the suicide of himself.
yeah.
And you're right, like this that odd feeling of that of euphoria that serial killers claim to experience in that this sort of where their god complex is sort of codified because they are the taker of life um, is something that could easily be depicted here, or the that clarity that they say is that what comes at the moment of death, um, where the everything's brighter and
Yeah.
you experience these feelings of like vibrating and transcendence. Um, is also something else that could be extrapolated from that line, which again underscores how cool it is that there's all this room for interpretation. And I just have to say that if this is a Rorschach test, if this is an auditory ink blot test, I'm glad I came to the end of offing oneself because of the awful things you did versus just being a stone cold fucking killer because you want to get out of a situation. I'd like to think if I was stuck in such a horrible choice, I would pick the more honorable way to go out than that of being a murderer.
It
But yeah,
depends how you go out. I mean, a car bomb, you know, you're taking people with you.
that,
Yeah, I'd just say this. I mean, there's one contributor that just really honed in on I'll go downtown and my tying tails. And he thought, right, yeah, this is about Jack the Ripper, and just went all the way down that plug hole.
yeah,
Um, the one thing that does sort of like puzzle me is the amount of times he says they ought to practice what they preach. I'm going to practice what I preach, you know, whether he's talking about hypocrisy or whatever, but it just seems to, it comes in a few times in the
yeah,
song and it just makes me ponder, that's all. But yeah, overall, it's just great. And even if you're not trying to determine the words, the meaning of the words, just the way he sings it and it just flows through, it's just great piece of writing and delivery as well.
yeah,
You know, it's,
yeah. You're right.
yeah, yeah. So this is a really, really good song, from a really good album. Um, for a time, it was my favorite Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds album. It's still up there, and but
Mm.
then there's lots that are as well. So yeah, it's just a different a change of pace from him as well. So yeah, I thought it'd be interesting.
Only
Cool.
slight change of pace because he loves to
Yeah.
talk about some dark shit, man.
Okay. Oh, and I'll give you something upbeat next time.
It's all good. I like it.
But there's plenty of dark shit as well, don't worry.
Yeah, yeah, believe it.
Cool. All right, I'll wrap things up. Thanks for listening to this, Andy.
Thank you, Carl.
Um, folks out there, tell us what you think. Please do hit the like button if you like this. You'd be a fool not to. Treat to drop some comments about this song. I think it is a masterpiece, but tell us what you think. About this album as well, I think it's a great album. Yeah, sometimes I really like it more than the next two, well, three now, from new ones out, but sometimes I don't. Just mood I'm in. Some other really good songs on this as well. But yeah, please, we'd love to hear from you, all your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. If you dig this sort of shit, like we dig this sort of shit, then we're both shit diggers. No, but we're going to have a lot more Nick Cave on this channel in 2025. So stay tuned, subscribe, look after yourself. That being said, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see all of you on the next episode of the Audiophiles.
We'll see you later, guys.